Доброго дня всім.
Шановні колеги, добрий день. Тут я вийшла. Пане Олеже, будь ласка, перевірте, чи я все ще є ко-хостом. Так, dear colleagues, sorry for some delays. My Zoom decided to update and took some time to do this. So, can I please ask Sharon, Titse, York, and who's else from our speakers is already with us? Please switch on your microphone so we can check the sound.
Hi, this is York. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you all right. Thank you, York.
Oh, hi, this is
То це теж результат, так би мовити, тих певних викликів, з якими ми стикаємося. У нас зараз немає гарантованого стабільного світла, зв'язку, і це створює нам певні проблеми. Але ми українці, і ми вміємо працювати навіть поза ті проблеми, які є, і я сподіваюся, що задум на нашу сьогоднішню зустріч справдиться якнайкраще. А задум наш полягає у тому, аби в режимі вебінару ми обговорили сьогодні загрози правам жінок через штучний інтелект. Як долати їх і які рішення можуть бути запропоновані в цьому? Наш захід проводить сьогодні наша робоча група Громадської ради експертної при міжфракційному об'єднанні рівні можливості, яка фактично у нас є, так би мовити, сьогодні головним діячем під час всесвітньої акції «16 днів проти гендерно зумовленого насильства». І модерувати зустріч буде якраз координаторка цієї групи пані Марія Дмитрієва. Ми будемо сьогодні раді бачити тут наших колег, експертів, зацікавлені громадські організації, представників різних, абсолютно різних організацій і державних органів і структур, тому що наш захід проводиться в тому числі і за підтримки Міністерства соціальної політики. Ми проводимо цей захід, пам'ятаючи про велику стратегічну ідею Ради Європи, яка втілилася в стратегії гендерної рівності на 2024-2029 роки. І якраз один із моментів цієї стратегії, в тому числі спрямований на захист жінок від різного роду негативних впливів і можливостей ризику, що, власне, ми і будемо розглядати. Отже, я передаю слово пані Марії Дмитрієвій, і я всіх вас заохочую до активного обговорення, до активної участі, до питань. Можете питання надсилати в чаті, у нас буде потім час відкритого мікрофону, коли ми зможемо обмінюватися своїми враженнями, думками, задавати питання. Прошу, пані Марія.
Дякую, пані Ларисо. Організаційно нагадую, що у нас є переклад. Переклад ви вмикаєте кнопкою, яка виглядає як земна куля. Ваші питання, будь ласка, протягом заходу можете складати в чат. Ми всіх... Я як у хост. Значить, всіх прошу писати ваші питання в чаті. І нагадаю, так, воно від мене хоче, щоб я підтвердила, якою мовою я говорю. Я нагадаю, що у нас сьогодні багато доповідачів. І перша половина нашого заходу буде присвячена, власне, ризикам штучного інтелекту для прав жінок, і друга половина буде присвячена можливим рішенням для того, щоб використання штучного інтелекту було етичним та інклюзивним. І ви бачили імена всіх, хто у нас будуть в програмі, я сподіваюся, ви прочитали. І зараз я надам слово для оглядової невеличкої такої промови пані Тетяні Котляренко, міжнародній експертці з США, яка тривалий час була радницею в Офісі з прав людини в ОБСЄ, зокрема з питань боротьби з торгівлею людьми, яка добре обізнана із міжнародним і з українським контекстом. Прошу, пані Тетяно, у вас є 5 хвилин.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I would like to thank the Democracy Development Center for leading the very high-level conversation and engagement on this issue in Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed policymakers, experts, and other advocates for human rights, today we convene at a critical juncture where technology, a force capable of transformative good, poses growing threats to women's rights. Artificial intelligence is not inherently malicious, but its misuse can perpetuate harm, deepen inequality, and undermine our collective pursuit of justice. Specifically, AI-driven harassment, deepfake pornography, cyberstalking, human trafficking, and other forms of exploitation demand our urgent attention and coordinated action. AI technologies are evolving at an unprecedented pace. While they offer immense promises in areas like healthcare, education, and economic development, their application in malicious contexts has exposed women to heightened vulnerabilities. I would like to mention a few of these areas, starting with harassment of female politicians online, as well as others in women in positions of authority and visibility. Women in leadership positions, particularly politicians, face a disproportionate share of online abuse. Research shows that female politicians receive significantly more harassment compared to their male counterparts, with messages often laden with misogyny and threats of violence. This not only stifles their voices, but also discourages other women from entering public service, perpetuating gender imbalances in political representation. For example, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, is such an example of this type of harassment. I'd like to mention another form of harassment, which is deepfake pornography. Deepfake technology powered by sophisticated AI algorithms enables the creation of hyper-realistic but fake content, often targeting women and girls. Deepfake pornography, the non-consensual use of a woman's likeness in explicit material, is a growing epidemic. Victims suffer profound psychological harm, social stigmatization, and professional repercussions. And we have seen an outbreak of this in South Korea, for example, resulting in severe consequences to schoolgirls and university students, girls, resulting in suicides and very, very harmful psychological impacts. But we will also even seen this, for example, with superstars such as Taylor Swift, who had her image used in deepfake pornography. Another type of risk is cyberstalking and digital surveillance. AI-driven tools make cyberstalking more invasive than ever. Perpetrators can deploy facial recognition, location tracking, and even predictive analytics to monitor and manipulate their targets. Women are particularly vulnerable to these intrusions, which can escalate to physical threats. And we have seen this globally, actually, as a very serious issue. Another issue that I've worked on for quite some time, and I know Maria has and many others here, is human trafficking and sexual exploitation. AI is being weaponized in human trafficking networks. Machine learning algorithms analyze data to identify potential victims, while traffickers exploit online platforms powered by AI to groom and lure women and girls. Once entrapped, victims are subjected to unimaginable suffering, often with AI tools used to control and exploit them further. Addressing these multifaceted threats requires a robust policy framework grounded in prevention, accountability, and empowerment. I propose a few of the following actions to create a comprehensive approach. 1. Strengthening legal protections. Existing laws must evolve to address the unique challenges posed by AI-driven threats. Policymakers should, 1, criminalize deepfake production and distribution of pornography. They should enact legislation that explicitly prohibits the creation and dissemination of non-consensual deepfake content with severe penalties for violators. Expand harassment laws to include provisions for AI-driven harassment, ensuring that online abuse targeting women receives the same attention as offline violence. Mandate platform accountability and hold social media companies and online platforms accountable for hosting harmful content. Introduce fines and penalties for platforms that fail to remove abusive material promptly. Also address exploitation and trafficking of women for the purpose of pornography production, which is another type of abuse that can happen online and requires legal protections. There should be an investment in technology solutions. For example, AI can also be a powerful tool for protection. The Ukrainian government, for example, could develop detection tools and fund the development of AI tools capable of identifying and flagging deepfake content and abusive posts in real time. Enhance digital safety infrastructure and support cybersecurity initiatives that safeguard women's online spaces. Create victim support system, which could be establishment of AI-powered platforms that allow victims to report abuse easily and access support services. Educating and empowering women is also critical in reducing vulnerability. Policymakers must promote digital literacy by implementing programs that teach women and girls how to recognize and protect themselves against online threats, raise awareness by launching public awareness campaigns highlighting the dangers of AI-driven exploitation and the resources available to victims, and foster resilience by collaborating with schools and community organizations to equip women with tools to navigate and combat digital threats. AI-driven threats transcend borders. Thus, international cooperation is essential to address these challenges effectively. This would require harmonization of legislation by working with global partners to create consistent legal standards for prosecuting AI-related crimes, sharing of best practices through exchange of strategies and technologies that have proven effective in combating online harassment and exploitation, and strengthening cross-border enforcement by bolstering international mechanisms to track and prosecute offenders who operate across jurisdictions. And finally, by promoting ethical AI development, which is paramount. Policymakers should enforce ethical standards, which require companies developing AI to adhere to strict ethical guidelines that prioritize human rights, audit AI systems by mandating regular audits of AI systems to ensure that they are not being misused for harassment, surveillance, or exploitation targeting women and girls, support diverse development teams to encourage diversity in AI research and development to prevent gender bias in AI applications. Addressing AI-driven threats to women is not just about mitigating harm. It is about building a world where women can participate fully and freely in society without fear. By taking decisive action, we can harness AI's potential to advance gender equality rather than undermine it. Let's envision a future where women in politics or women in positions of authority or visibility can lead boldly without enduring torrents of abuse. Technology empowers women to thrive, not traps them in cycles of fear and exploitation, and the internet becomes a safe and inclusive space for all, including women and girls. The challenges posed by AI-driven threats to women's rights are formidable, but they are not insurmountable. With thoughtful policymaking, technological innovation, and collective resolve, we can confront these challenges head-on. Let us commit to action. Not tomorrow, not next year, but today. The rights and dignity of women and girls everywhere depend on it. With that, I would like to thank you and invite you to listen to incredible presentations by top experts globally on this topic. Thank you.
Дякую, пані Тетяно. Це була честь для нас, що ви сьогодні до нас приєдналися. Я бачу, що Циці Матикаєр, лідерка з припинення сексуальної експлуатації, яка представляє організацію «Рівність зараз» або Equality Now з Великої Британії, вже підключилася, ми вас бачимо. І пані Циці розповідатиме про боротьбу з гендерно зумовленим насильством, що спричинене технічними засобами, і які існують глобальні заходи для локального впливу. Прошу, пані Циці, ви маєте десь 10-15 хвилин.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you to the Democracy Development Center for the opportunity to speak on this very important topic and to share some of the work that we are doing as Equality Now in the area of addressing tech-facilitated gender-based violence and championing women's digital rights globally. Dear policymakers, as our lives become increasingly digital, the threats and harms that are faced by women and girls online and in the digital space are evolving, including the growing global threat of tech-facilitated gender-based violence. And it is imperative that as we look for solutions, that we champion global responses but also ensure that the global responses can be adapted and implemented locally for impact, ensuring a safe and digital world for all. Thank you so much to Tatiana for setting the scene. I think, as we know, tech-facilitated gender-based violence includes a wide range of harmful activities, such as cyber stalking, online harassment, online non-consensual sharing of intimate images, tech-enabled human trafficking, hacking, hate speech, and online impersonation, which we see on the rise, and also just generally the use of technology to coerce and control. Tech-facilitated gender-based violence is amplified by growing online misogyny, which is coupled with online anonymity and limited regulation. We see growth in misogyny online, many young men being radicalized, and this then has an impact on the sort of violence that women and girls will then experience within the digital space. So these acts of tech-facilitated by gender-based violence not only violate the privacy and dignity of women and girls, but they also really have a profound impact on their psychological well-being, social well-being, and economic well-being as well. We know that they impact on women's dignity and fundamental rights. And here we are talking about the right to participation, privacy, and freedom of expression, for example. As we talk about tech-facilitated gender-based violence, I think it's important to highlight that intersectionality is crucial, both in terms of understanding and addressing the issue. Intersectionality basically recognizes that different forms of discrimination and oppression intersect, creating unique experiences of violence and harm. For example, a woman who's also a member of a racial minority, or who has a disability, or who is LGBTQI+, may face additional layers of vulnerability and discrimination online. And there are several reports from international organizations like Amnesty International, the Pew Research Center in the US, for example, that show the extent of violations that women with these intersecting identities are facing online. And as we have already had, women in public office, journalists, women politicians, and human rights defenders are also disproportionately affected by these harms online. The intersecting identities, when we're looking at issues of intersectionality, can exacerbate the impact of online violence, making it harder for survivors to seek help and to achieve justice. So if we are looking at any strategies to address violence in the digital space, we must consider these overlapping identities to ensure that all women and girls, and indeed all people, receive the support that they need, and that this support is tailored to their specific circumstances. Just to consider a few statistics that highlight the urgency, the global nature, and also the gendered nature of the problem of tech-facilitated gender-based violence. A study by the European Agency for Fundamental Rights found that 1 in 10 women has experienced some form of cyber harassment since the age of 15. In the US, a report by the Pew Research Center reveals that 41% of Americans have personally experienced online harassment, with women, especially young women, being disproportionately affected. And when we look at other parts of the world, like Kenya, for example, a 2019 report found that 65% of women using the internet have experienced or encountered some form of online harassment. And UN Women will give us some of these statistics from a global perspective, where 58% of young women and girls globally have experienced violence online, particularly on social media platforms, and they are 27 times more likely to be harassed online than men. We've already heard about the surge in the use of artificial intelligence that exacerbates this issue online. 96% of deepfakes available online are pornographic, and 99% of these target women and girls. So with the lack of strong international legal frameworks and weak international cooperation, we see that exploiters are taking advantage of the challenges in identifying and prosecuting these crimes across jurisdictions, and they go on to abuse and exploit with impunity. Very few countries globally have laws that properly and effectively hold tech platforms accountable. And often due to jurisdictional and evidentiary issues, it is quite hard to enforce these laws. So from a human rights and gender equality perspective, how then do we need to be tackling this issue of gender-based violence online? Addressing tech-facilitated gender-based violence is not just about the individuals, but we really need to be challenging the systemic gender inequalities that are perpetuating this violence. We need to recognize that the power dynamics are at play, and intersectionality of different forms of discrimination is also at play. And I think fundamentally we need to recognize that online gender-based violence needs to be framed as occurring within the systemic violence that affects women worldwide. Public discourse often treats it as separate from the real world. But however, from the experiences of women, from adolescents, from girls, the experiences show that the violence that they encounter in the digital space has tangible effect across all areas of their lives, and therefore highlighting the continuum of violence in public and private and in online and offline spaces. Tatiana has already made the point that to be able to effectively combat this problem, we need a multifaceted and coordinated global response. But the point as well is that this global response should be able to be translated into meaningful local actions. We already know from the years of working in this area that fragmented and unequal responses are not sufficient, and that platforms have profited from this lack of coordination. So some of the key strategies that we need to be looking at is really this piece around international legal frameworks and cooperations and international cooperation, and that governments must collaborate to develop and implement these comprehensive legal frameworks. We know that national siloed approaches alone are not effective in addressing what is fundamentally a global and multi-jurisdictional problem. But these laws need also to be grounded in existing human rights principles and ensure the accountability of perpetrators regardless of their location. So practically, how would it then work for a government or a state? I think we need to be looking at how governments can use and maximize the frameworks that we already have at the global level. For instance, we have got the Istanbul Convention, which is a legally binding treaty and addresses violence against women, including digital violence. We also have at the UN level, CEDAW, which talks about issues of violence in the general comments that are issued out by the committee. And recently at the UN level, we've also seen governments adopting the Global Digital Compact, which has provisions around ensuring gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and commitments by governments to tackle the issue of violence that is perpetrated through the use of technology. So how can individual governments make use of some of those existing legal frameworks? We've seen some progress in regions like the Latin America and Caribbean that is developing a model law on tech-facilitated gender-based violence, with the idea that this model law will be adopted and domesticated by countries within that region. We also see in Africa that the African Union is starting to look seriously into this issue, undertaking research to understand the nature of the problem on the African context. We also really need to be looking at issues of tech sector accountability. We know that the digital realm has no borders, and neither do these multinational companies that are dominating this space. Existing attempts to regulate them have been insufficient. In some cases, they are non-binding or simply powerless. And what we then have is that women, girls, and minorities are bearing the heaviest burden of this failure to hold tech companies accountable. We must also then, once we've got frameworks that look at the accountability of the tech sector at the global level, is then important to ensure that these are then actualized at the local level through the adoption of appropriate laws and policies within countries. It's also important to ensure that we have education and awareness, raising awareness, particularly around duty bearers, at the national level or the local level, on how to respond to these cases is very crucial. For example, some of the work that we are doing in Kenya is working with the local women judges and magistrates to support their awareness around tech-facilitated gender-based violence, and to work out, local solutions in terms of how they can use existing laws to support survivors. And at the same time, also ensuring that there's a robust legal framework at the local level to provide sufficient remedies to survivors. It's important as well to utilize a survivor-centered approach. So creating support systems for survivors is essential, including their psychological support, legal assistance, safe spaces for women to report without fear of retribution. And in conclusion, is just to reiterate the point that we do require concerted efforts from all sectors of society. We can champion global responses because that is critical, but we need to foster local adaptation of those global responses so that we can create a system that is accessible for women at the local level, and a digital world that is more inclusive for everyone. We need to stand together to amplify the voices of survivors, and we need fundamentally to dismantle the systemic structures that are perpetuating violence and inequality. Thank you.
Дякую, Цице, за такий чіткий опис ситуації і за визначення можливих шляхів боротьби з цими проблемами. Чи ви зможете з нами ще лишитися, чи ви б хотіли почути питання до вас прямо зараз, якщо є?
I'm happy to stay on, Maria. Yeah.
Ага. Дякую, дякую. Добре, наступне у нас прошу до слова пані Манді Сангера, міжнародну правозахисницю, теж з Великої Британії, яка розповість про те, як ми визначаємо виклики і як шукаємо рішення для подолання насильства в інтернеті щодо жінок і дівчат. Прошу, пані Манді, у вас теж є 15 хвилин.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to come to this very important conversation. Thank you, Tatiana, and everybody else that's organized this very important conversation. So I really want to talk about some of the challenges and what kind of things can we do practically. And I want to give some examples of where we have seen people being really exploited in recent years, especially. As we know that we all want information and data at real time at our fingers, which is fantastic. But at the same time, it also has its own challenges and issues where, people are vulnerable and easily exploited online. And there's been a lot of work that's been done in the UK around online safety. There's legislation that is going through as well to look at how do we keep women, children, ourselves safe online. And some of the challenges that we have seen is that actually that we got to take responsibility, not just to tech companies, as much as they have a role to play. We really need to say to them that we are looking at, like, you know, you've got these roles, you've got this company, people are signing their data over. What are the big companies doing? Then it's about what role is governments doing? And then it's about ourselves looking at, on the ground as individuals, what are we doing and what can we do to stay safe? And one of the things that I was involved in earlier this year was looking at, actually, when we look at like human rights legislation, it's a little bit out of date, but actually, what about our data, our information? How do we kind of regulate that on a global level? We have seen AI generate images and videos in real time, and somebody could use my voice, but actually say whatever they want to. So the technology is moving so fast that actually we're not able to keep up with it. We have seen young women, when there was crisis in Ukraine, joining chats online, and there were men online looking for beautiful women from Ukraine, wanting to be their host and wanting to take them into their homes and wanted to be their sponsor and look after these women. And there were some real concerns because actually there was a lot of safeguarding issues. And when we spoke to some of these women and we were saying, how did you meet this person? Where did you know this person? It was like, I met them in a chat room. I met them on Facebook. I met them on some sort of app. And we had to say to them, do you know what? We understand that you're desperate. You want to leave. We saw the same thing in Afghanistan, where people were using social media and technology to navigate and ask for help. But at the same time, there was predators and people around at the same time who were pretending to support and help, but were not willing to do that. So I think that for me, we need to look at that, you know, what are the international systems in place to tackle gender-based violence, specifically violence against women? How do we do this? There's been a lot of meetings where G7 has a roadmap around looking at how do we respond to this. The UN has its own policies and procedures. There's so much legislation, but actually in practice, how is that working? And how can we really bring the tech companies, local government, advocates, and individuals to the same decision-making table and making people responsible? So what I would say is that we need to be looking at what are the problems, how are we going to address these problems, and what is the role? And so for me, I'm somebody that has ended up doing a lot of work in the tech industry, and I can tell you I'm not the best at like using technology, but I was brought in to look at, these are the problems and this is what the solutions, and this is how I fell into the tech industry. And it's been fantastic to be involved in hackathons and ideathons and game jams in over 144 countries and engaging and working with real people. But at the same time, what I've realized is we create something. There are people who are able to create things even bigger and stronger than what we can create. So we need to understand, what does preventative work really look like? And so what I would always say is think globally, act locally, and we need to be looking at reporting and police and other departments taking online abuse seriously. I've seen young women be exploited where somebody has met them on a dating site wanting to be their boyfriend, ended up blackmailing the woman by asking her to send photographs, and she's been sexually exploited, and she's done something where she feels like, oh my God, you know, I'm talking to somebody who's in a relationship with me, and she hadn't thought about the consequences of what that was happening and ended up there. So like revenge porn in the UK is now taken seriously. They do recognize that as a real crime and looked at like, how do we tackle that? So I think as we're moving forward with technology and we're moving and getting information in real time, and you know, which is fantastic, but we also need to put in the resources and the funding to tackle those issues. And it's also about bringing women in to really talk about their experiences and give us real examples. If we don't know what the problem is, how can we really fix it? Because the problem is a lot of people will come up with solutions, and people that live in the big world of like Silicon Valley and other tech industries around the world will create something, but if they don't hear from real voices, they don't know about the real challenges, how can they really address that? So I think that, you know, we need to look at working globally, and where we have an opportunity like this event to raise the issue, then we need to do that. We need to give examples that people are being trafficked and being exploited, and people, you know, there's been technology that has been fantastic where it recognizes people's eyeballs and they can capture that, you know, that this person was actually trafficked in there. So I think that there's been some really good solutions with technology. But however, this is about thinking about on a daily basis, these are our issues. How do we address them? And how do we support people to access the right information? And again, I know I keep going after the big tech companies, but they really do need to talk about the misinformation that is out there. And when women report that their images have ended up on the dark web where a partner has put something on the internet, it takes weeks or months to take that down. It takes the police ages to try and look at this, and they don't know how to access and take things down off the internet. So there are so many challenges, and this is about like bringing the right people in, and it's great to have policy, but if it doesn't work in practice, then how do we make it work? We have seen children be befriended on games, and they've gone out to meet somebody and not realize that the person that they're talking to is not a 12-year-old, but actually a 40-year-old man. We have seen children leave home to go and meet somebody who they think is their boyfriend. So we need to look at real issues around grooming, people being exploited, people falling victims to financial and other abuses, as well as the sexual harms that have happened to them. So I just think that there's been a lot of conversations that have happened and will continue to happen. But I do just think that I would say that, you know, we keep the conversation going. It's really important that we have a multi-agency approach to tackling violence against women online, and that we realise that actually abuse can happen anywhere. It can happen online, and we need the authorities to take it as serious as they would if I reported rape in, you know, to the police. So on that note, I'm going to stop unless somebody's got a question. I'm afraid I won't be long to be able to stay long. I'm only around for 15 minutes, I'm afraid.
Дякую, Менді, за дуже важкі приклади і важкі питання, які ви піднімали в вашому виступі. Ми бачимо попереднє питання до Циці, я його задам пізніше. Зараз я задам питання до вас. Чи вам відомі практики захисту жінок від насилля в інтернеті, якщо жінки знаходяться на окупованих територіях?
Sorry, could you come again?
That is a question for Mandy.
Oh, for Mandy, yeah.
Oh, sorry, can you tell me that in English? I didn't understand it, sorry. It didn't come through.
Okay, Дмитро, я перекладу. So, are there any practices to protect women against violence online when these women are staying on the territories occupied by the enemy state, like we have occupied areas in Ukraine occupied by Russia?
Yeah. Okay, that's a really good question, by the way. I think that we need to look at, like, how do we use artificial intelligence, what role it can play in, like, law enforcement, in looking at investigations, tackling, like, hostile kind of child abuse and different things like that. We have seen good practice in Ukraine where Mykolaiv from Save Ukraine with young people been able to bring young people back. But we need to look at working in partnership with Interpol and Europol, because these organizations are here to work across borders, work across and share intelligence. So we do have systems and organizations in place. We need to be looking at that there is a database which notifies and kind of looks at, it's a tracker with Interpol, which is a G7 inferior security tracker, which they use to look at in areas of conflict and things like that, which I know that there is that around the world. But we do need to look at working in partnership. We need to share intelligence. We need to report things. And again, when we look at how do we look at people, and we're looking at UN, and they say they have this whole We Protect Global Alliance as well, which is a big collective engaging with people to tackle these issues. And this is around a global partnership fund about tackling violence against children and people in situations like conflicts in Ukraine.
Дякую. Є ще одне питання. Чи штучний інтелект може виступати як сутенер? Чи люди, які шукають порноматеріали, чи доступ до осіб в проституції, чи штучний інтелект може це для них робити?
I'm trying to change the language to English, but it's not letting me, I'm afraid. I can't read the question, sorry.
I can translate it for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Can artificial intelligence act as a pimp or procurer for people looking for pornographic materials or for prostituted persons?
That's a good question as well. I might bring Tatiana onto that, but there have been organizations that have looked at working, whether it's A21 and other organizations that have looked at working with people around how we're using AI. We also know that people are very clever with using like technology. I mean, we kind of do something today and tomorrow somebody's going to come up along and create something better. But it is about like, how do we stop people being sexually exploited, people being being trafficked around the world into prostitution around the world, and how do we use that? So there was technology that the UK was looking at around like your eyeballs and looking at censoring and capturing that actually this person was on a list of like being a vulnerable person. I just think that that we had the AI summit in the UK, which was about looking at the safety. And I think that any government around the world will say that as much as we want to use it and think it's great, there are some real challenges around it, because actually we're not able to keep up with things in real time. We don't have the technology to kind of like keep ourselves safe. But how do we do that? Again, this is about like a joined up approach, that we can't do it in isolation. We need to look at working with companies, and we need victims to be able to access affordable or free technology that can keep them safe, where they could ask for help if we knew that as well. I don't know if there's anything else that you might want to add, Tatiana, to that.
I could add a few points to this, which is the following. AI can be used to identify vulnerable victims like a pimp.
Yeah.
It could be used to groom them,
Yes.
recruit them, advertise them, and manage them. So you could then have potentially a physical body in terms of a person or an entity that is running a massive global conglomerate of trafficking and sexual exploitation, which is then made efficient and controlled and supported by AI technology.
Yeah. And we have seen technology where governments around the world and police departments around the world have used AI, where they've got a young person who is AI generated and created to stop perpetrators online talking to a 12, 13-year-old young woman, and people want to meet that person. So we have seen it being used in good as well. And I think that those are the sort of situations where we have seen it really work. And it's a really good example of where we can stop victims. And it is a tool that we need to use, even though we're sometimes scared of using it, but it is there to help us to protect and keep people safe and do that.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you.
Just in case, if you push the button that is called interpretation and you choose English channel, you can hear the interpreting.
Oh, thank you. I didn't have it on my screen, which is a shame, because normally it
Okay.
does pop up and it didn't
Oh,
turn
yeah,
up, which
okay.
is a shame. So
Yeah.
sorry about that, but thank you so much. And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Так, шановні колеги, ми ще маємо одне питання до Циці, і ми маємо питання до Тетяни. Значить, Циці, є питання до вас. Ви кажете, що окремі країни вже розробляють відповідні закони. На що направлені ці закони? Що вони регулюють? І як ви гадаєте, наскільки ефективними будуть закони, ухвалені в окремих країнах, якщо штучний інтелект є глобальною загрозою?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think Mandy was talking about the experience of the UK. So maybe I can talk about, other countries that we've seen, for instance, in Africa and Latin America. I think what we've seen is perhaps what do you call it, like when you are quickly responding to a problem, but maybe you have not necessarily thought of it holistically. So what we see, I think, is a patchwork of legislation rather than comprehensive legislation. So we have some countries that will respond directly to the issue of, let's say, deep fakes, but perhaps they haven't addressed in their trafficking legislation or regulations the tech dimensions of tech, or they will address issues of online, image-based, non-consensual sharing of images, but perhaps haven't fully addressed the issue of cyber stalking. So I think what we are saying when we are working locally in a country, and we are doing this in partnership with local organizations, is to really understand, how is tech-facilitated gender-based violence occurring within that context? How do we address it holistically instead of knee-jerk reactions to issues that may be coming, and then you realize that actually your laws are not up to date because the technology is advancing very quickly and sometimes quicker than we are able to legislate. So I think there's this need to think about how to do it holistically, but also to ensure that the laws that are developed are future-proof, so that you don't have to constantly change your laws. I think many governments agree around the issue of children. So we see quite a lot of laws coming around child sexual abuse materials, grooming of children, and so on. But I think once it gets to adults, there is need to really think about it comprehensively, look at existing legislation on gender-based violence, and making sure that the legislation becomes future-proof and is not knee-jerk reaction.
I'm happy to address the question to me on how AI can be used to exploit and traffic women online for sexual exploitation. There are two different ways. There's the direct way, which I've mentioned in addition to the question that Mandy mentioned. And then there is an indirect way where any of our images, yours, mine, your child's, can be used to produce things like deep fake pornography, other pornographic materials and such, which actually have also very significant impact on our lives. So there are very many ways that this can be done now. And as I said, this creates incredible efficiency for those that are looking to exploit women and girls for sexual exploitation.
I'm so, перепрошую, певні технічні накладки з мого боку. А, Дякую, Тетяно. Я так бачу, Менді вже пішла. Дякую, Циці, за відповідь. І ми переходимо, власне, до другої частини нашого сьогоднішнього вебінару. І я запрошую до слова Йорка Роудса, професора Нью-Йоркського університету, який, власне, працює у тематиці етичної технічної колаборації. Прошу, пане Йорку, вам слово. У вас 15 хвилин.
Thank you, Maria. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for convening this important conversation. My name is York Rhodes, and I'm here first as a husband and a father of 2 children, now a professional woman and man in my life. Here as a gender diverse ally, apparently, to my co-presenters. And I'm here as a humanitarian who is also studying this area through the work that we're doing at New York University in the Ethical Tech CoLab. Lastly, I am here as a tech optimist and studied across various different technical landscapes, including privacy, personal identity, and data ownership, as well as data controls in a world of the internet, which, as was mentioned earlier, is very much a world of either anonymity or pseudonymity. And so as we think about the this landscape, we can look at it from a lens of data. And that will help us to think about how do we scale solutions to the problems. And so the work that we're doing very specifically in the Ethical Tech CoLab at New York University is about the intersection of tooling, capabilities, data analysis, signals, and testing how we can use those signals to look for patterns that exist online. And then how do we use additional tools to affect change once we've found patterns that have a high probability of inference of the different violations that we've heard about today, whether it's grooming in online gaming rooms or Twitch streams or social media and those types of behaviors. The example, and I won't go into too much on the problem side, because I think we've heard quite a bit of detail on that. And I'm going to take a lens of how do we think about the landscape of technical approaches that will allow us to get to a point where we can actually do something at scale, and sort of I'll explain sort of the path that we're going on there. And I know that some of my co-presenters who I have worked with closely also have various different approaches and opinions on this as well. So my question is, we read a lot about the impact of technology and the impact of broadly the internet and the online experience of the internet on how it impacts people. And you can read many different stories. One of the ones that is particularly poignant, I think, is an article with, and I'm paraphrasing here, approximately the title of an online gaming platform is a hellscape of pedophilia grooming, which is quite concerning. And I think the problem here that exists is really a problem of providing accessibility to the entire world, whoever can get on the internet, which on one hand is good, And then providing tools for bad actors to target, as we've discussed a little bit. You know, there was a question earlier actually that would be interesting, I think, to respond to here as well, is how can technology be used to essentially serve as a grooming tool or pimp or otherwise. I think very similar to the cybersecurity sphere, technology will be used in very creative ways, both for positive impact and for negative impact. And so just as an example, if you think about online dating apps, which I think was mentioned earlier, and the tools in the advertising industry, something called lead generation. If you look at online dating apps, they actually have quite a few fake accounts that are essentially bots, which could be AI driven or could be very structurally driven prior to AI with just scripts that they would use. AI enhances that from a static script to a conversation. And the pattern there is a pattern that's very common in advertising on the internet, which is how do I derive data about consumers? How do I lead consumers down a path to something I want them to do? So these are tools that are used by people trying to make money online for lead generation. If you think about the pattern of trying to coerce someone into paying money for pornography online, that is a lead generation pathline. And so there is a lot of data that we have about what are the journeys of consumers that they get walked through with different incentives to actually perform specific actions, and what are the tools that have existed for quite some time to do that. For myself, I actually worked in lead generation in 2008, fairly early in the internet search sphere. And we very specifically had tooling that would walk consumers through giving up lots of personal data that could then be sold to other companies for a commercial value proposition. That methodology is what's being used today in dating apps, as an example, to walk people towards giving up money for pornography. And so that's one example of where technology is being used, but what the positive example of that is the underlying tools we actually know quite well from an advertising perspective. And so if we look at the world of data on the internet, then one of the highest value propositions of the world of data on the internet is advertising, right? So for example, Facebook makes 97% of their revenue from advertising, right? And so this is a very well-studied analytical data environment with a lot of tools that we can use to think about how do we use those tools to change or intervene in behaviors online. So a couple of the projects that we're looking at in the Ethical Tech Lab at New York University are how do we take some of these tools and data sets and look for signals in the data first. We have to obviously prove that we can find patterns of online grooming, and whether that's in Twitch streams or games or social media, if the data is available publicly, and a lot of it is, because in gaming platforms, there is a chat protocol called IRC, which is basically publicly available data. And then there's other tools that are ingesting Twitch streams in the market for advertising purposes that can be used to analyze what is going on in the context of a gaming environment, including the chat data, which, as I mentioned, is public, what's actually happening in the video and in the screen, and what's happening in the audio. All of that is signal or data that can be combined together to look for specific patterns of behaviors. In a scenario where someone is being groomed or recruited online for human trafficking, the pattern roughly will look something like a public conversation that winds up with two parties of a public conversation disappearing. And that pattern is basically how you would go from talking to someone, when you're grooming them, trying to get them to engage with you, and then ultimately at the end of that conversation, taking that conversation off of the public chat into a encrypted messaging application. So at that point, you've lost the battle, right? So how do you identify from those online public conversations and as much data as we can glean from the internet and all of those different sources that I mentioned? In the case of Twitch streams, you actually combine a lot of the data together in a time sequence. And so it gives you a lot of landscape to analyze, to figure out what does a signal look like that is roughly what I described. Certain keywords, certain patterns, certain coercion tactics that ultimately will wind up in a progression towards the conversation disappearing. I suspect, and the theory that we have here is that that will be a pretty common pattern that we can find, because it ends in a very definitive thing, right? The conversation ends and we no longer see a trail of that specific behavior between those two individuals who are having that conversation online. So that's an example of one of the investigations that we're looking at in the lab. A second example that we're looking at is actually there's a study done by 4 researchers at New York University on online job board postings that are known recruiting tools for human trafficking. And so they did research on this where they basically documented their work through the analysis that they were doing. And the great thing is that they created an open source data set associated with that research that is data that is now well-defined data about online job posting boards, and the data associated with those job posts very specifically that is known human trafficking data. What's also interesting about this, and we haven't started analyzing that data yet, to be clear, but that is also one of the data sets that we're going to be looking at, because it is known human trafficking data for job postings. What's also interesting is, going back to the point I made earlier about what we know about the world of the internet and online advertising, is every single behavior that a consumer takes when they're online creates telemetry that we can analyze. Every click, every path, every journey that every consumer takes is accessible today through data, which is used for advertising and targeting. That same data can be used to analyze what is the pattern that a consumer goes through when they see one of these online job advertisements. Where does it take them? What are the steps in that journey? Where do we lose that consumer, right, from that perspective? And so those are just 2 examples of how do we look at existing contexts from the world of the internet and data from an advertising perspective, and then start to use that to look for patterns and signals. And once we actually have a high probability of a signal that determines an activity, grooming or online trafficking, we can then start to test that at scale across a lot of different systems across the internet. And so as we progress through this research, we'll be able to do that testing. AI plays a big role in this, obviously. It allows us to analyze data at scale in ways that are far more efficient than what we can do as individual consumers and data analysts. Obviously, data analysts will be involved in guiding that research. AI helps us scale that research. And then secondly, if you look at the ways AI is being used in the example that I mentioned earlier, whether it's in a dating app or for other nefarious activities, it can be also used to scale and test different patterns and how those patterns might create preventative impact in the market. And so we ultimately, our goal is to get to the point where we can have well-defined interventions to try to stop consumers at scale from taking that next bad step, which would wind up being them going offline, for example, in the case of grooming, or following a pattern that is a known path to human trafficking. And so broadly, that's how we're thinking about the research. We are sort of at the beginning of this in terms of those 2 data sets, but we have a pretty strong belief that with the tools available, the knowledge of the advertising world on the internet and how data informs every journey, that there is quite a large landscape of data that we can use in concert with tools to get the signal, search for the signal, do A/B testing to see how we might impact consumer behavior at the point of risk, and then be able to scale that up with tools over time. So broadly, that's the focus of the work that we're doing. This is obviously informed by a lot of technical knowledge across domains, as well as in the AI and the responsible AI space also. So I'll pause there and see if you want to go to questions or to the next presenter, whichever you prefer.
Дякую, Йорк. У нас повернулася до нас Шандра, як на щастя, і ми зараз надамо їй слово. Ми матимемо ще 10 хвилин наприкінці, щоб задати питання. Так, я рада надати слово пані Шандрі Вогорунту, засновниці і генеральній директорці громадської організації «Ментарі», яка надає допомогу особам, які врятувалися з торгівлі людьми в США. І Шандра розкаже нам трішки про технології діпфейків і сексуальну експлуатацію. Шандро, ви маєте 10 хвилин.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this amazing conversation, and also thank you to the organizer that bring the topic of how internet and AI actually have the most significant impact to gender-based violence, especially human trafficking. Human trafficking is a part of heinous crime around the world that now affected by the growth of technology. So AI, it's been used to recruit, to exploit it, traffic, and sometimes it's also give impact to someone, to the victim, horribly, and sometimes they will die. So this is my focus on how AI affected. Number one is recruitment through the internet using the AI. Promising something that very great, awesome, and also amazingly attracted people, especially kids and young people, and recruited and be a victim, whether virtually or become in person. So if we talk in person, the recruitment will affect them physically to come meet the person or assigned to meet the buyer and all the transaction using the internet. And the second, virtually the threat, the blackmail, and also how they've been used it's in many ways. Not only a certain actual figure through the internet, but AI can develop 99% similarity with the victim and 99% similar with the voice and the movement. Imagine, even some of the app, Facebook, can translate and can fix whatever you want to say in a different presentation. Just example, if you have a dance movement, just simple dance, when you put the music, AI can change your movement, follow with the music related with the voice, related with the meaning and wording from the music. Imagine. if just the movement, AI can create such of porn movie, porn picture. And right now, since we know CSAM, commercial sexual exploitation on children through many different ways, and AI take a big part on this matter. And we understand that porn for adult, the legislation, the law is not really help to prevent or to protect. But for the children, we have the law, even though it's not really powerful. Globally, we have law on children, and there is such prevention using internet or using AI to seek the previous speaker talking about understanding and finding the signal, and then the advertisement, and it can create the pattern that can help to identify. I agree, but I think we also have to look at the IPN, VPN, and the ID of the computer to prevent if there is a recruitment, there is a publicity, or many other platforms that they are being used. Especially we know that now the trafficker approaching using exciting trick with the AI. They become young, they become handsome, and attracting young people. And this is a part of the prevention, how the example, we talk about Facebook, TikTok, and dating apps. We talk about Instagram that become a platform. The company has to hold accountable, to be held accountable actually. But until now, the law is not in place. In some of the element in place, so we can intervene using the law, because of the law can access all the internet system that have to follow the regulation, policy, and what needs to be done to prevent and intervene, and also to protect. So this is what we need to be done, even though in the United States right now we're still juggling and still working very hardly to pass a specific law related to the children. And for the adult, this is the problem with the adult. Since the porn is legal in most of the states, it is difficult to prevent, to protect adults from the internet crime on human trafficking, exploitation, and other form of abuse that recently brought up by the United Nations. Is a part of our campaigns right now. The internet is identified by the United Nations is a part of abuse to women and girls specifically. The finding from the research and survey from the UN Women, over 90% the victim of the internet abuse, they are women and girls. So imagine internet actually facilitated this abuse. How we can prevent it? Actually, it takes comprehensive action. Comprehensive action that been taken from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top, both ways, from the family, education from the family, from the school system, from the community, from the CSO, from the government also need to be, to be able to be a part of this. From the top, have the law, have the regulation and policy, have to be implemented until the ground, because education is a part of the solution and intervened by the law. So this is the challenge right now. I will talk about the challenge on adult. so many hidden victims right now in the internet crime, which is used by a criminal. We knows all the I will not mention about the dating app as the gate of exploitation, but I talk about porn site that contain gender-based violence abuse. All of them, I believe, this is 99% to 150%. Violence abuse in the production of pornography that distributed using the internet. From the actual porn that they film, they created another one using AI, more horrible porn movie or porn video that originally taken from the porn movie that is already out there. Imagine the porn site, that legal site that having license. Imagine in the dark web, so much happening that we cannot control. I believe that, working on internet policy, legislation, and regulation is important and hold them accountable. It is one to prevent. And also, I think this is what we need to talk about: education. Education not only in the school system, but education on many different platforms, like on giving a specific highlight, like pop-up, like cookies, that dating app might contain sexual abuse and violence, thoughts to exploitation and trafficking, example. On many different sites, example, job. I saw in some app, if job, be careful, this is soliciting or something, like a message that you have to be careful. I think we should, as a community, as the educator, community activists, and leader here, we should able to look at all the gap and the whole, what need to be done with this? Because the victim cannot protect themselves. Survivor sometimes cannot identify if they're victim or they are survivor. So I think it takes comprehensive action for us to prevent the internet and AI use the ability of technology to create more horrible action on vulnerable people. So I just add one more minute, and I'm the product of the internet abuse and violence, that my porn video until now is still out there. So especially in the dark web, you will find me easily over there. And it takes already over 20 years. I thought that my site will be taken off, but all the porn site didn't care. Even I fight through law, through many different action, because of I was adult, 24 years old, they cannot do anything. So this is just a challenge how adult pornography, adult internet abuse and violence is not really easy to fight. Maybe the children, it's more easier. And let's start with the children and move forward. The adult also will be protected and giving services. Thank you.
Дуже дякую, пані Шандро, за те, що звернули нашу увагу на цей неочевидний вид злочинів і проти дітей, і проти дорослих. Шановні колеги, зверніть, будь ласка, увагу, пані Шандра сама пережила таку форму експлуатації, і вона не перший рік бореться з нею і захищає права інших постраждалих. Дякую, Шандро. Я зараз хочу передати слово докторці Ейліані Абдул-Рахман, старшій науковій співробітниці Джорджтаунського університету, яка розповість нам про алгоритми онлайн-переслідування в соціальних медіа. Пані Ейліані, у вас 10 хвилин, будь ласка. Дякую.
Thank you, Maria. Could you please share the presentation? Thank you, everyone, for being here today and such an important convening. And I thank the organizers, including Tatiana, Maria, and the various organizations for making this happen. So my name is Eliani, and I just want to move on quickly. Next slide, Maria, please. Maria, if you can move on to the next slide.
Ну ж, вже промотала. Can you, I
Yes, I
moved
can
them
hear you.
all.
Oh, okay.
I
It's not.
moved them.
Okay, I can't see it on my screen.
It's okay.
So
I will reshare it. Just a second.
okay.
You can start speaking.
Yeah, so I'm the first woman from Asia that joined Twitter's Trust and Safety Council back in 2016. And when Elon Musk bought the platform back in October 2022, within 1 month, there was a sudden rise in volumes of tweets and slurs and insults against Black people, gays, and also Jewish people. And so I couldn't stay on the council and resigned. What Elon Musk then did was to instigate harassment against the 3 women who resigned from the council. And so then I was a doctoral student at Harvard, and I changed my work, my thesis, to focus on this work now, on network harassment, so that other women after me and people, because you've heard from the previous speakers, who are the ones who are normally harassed online, people of color, people from historically marginalized communities, and also us women, so that this what I'm doing will help prevent this from happening in real time for other users. Next slide. If you could share the screen, I think that you can see the entire screen. Yeah, brilliant, if you could do that. So I'm just going to be very quick. So this is the content for today. Next slide. The term network harassment is used to refer to when somebody who's highly networked, so that means he has many followers, he is very influential. So somebody like, say, Donald Trump here in the US or Elon Musk, they say something and their followers would then do the harassment for them. Next slide. So why does it matter? You've heard from other speakers before me, from Tatiana, from York, from Chandra, why it affects the targets. It affects the mental health of targets. It makes people there's a chilling effect on their user speech, and targets leave the platform. Next slide. This is the current model of network harassment. It's quite new, published in 2021. If you look at the upper left corner, you see a red circle, and that's an amplifier. So somebody like Donald Trump or Elon Musk would say something, accusing the target on the right-hand side of contravening a moral norm. And then their followers, you can see that the network audience would then do the actual harassment. But there are some gaps in this model. Next slide. Next slide. So I now come to this term indirect swarming, because I think there is a new way to look at this taxonomy, this phenomenon of network harassment. Let me explain. Next slide. So when I resigned, you saw that we were all over the news, the BBC, NPR here in the US, and we were interviewed by very many platforms. Next slide. My colleagues had said earlier about the impact on targets. And so you can see one example, content warning, which is a death threat. So at the bottom here, the nap in the red circle, it's a slang for putting to sleep. That means killing somebody. Next slide. The work that I'm doing, I think there are two new categories within the taxonomy network harassment. So my colleague before me, York, had mentioned about specific patterns of behavior and what can be done about it. And so this is one example of that. So I think that under indirect swarming, you could see a sudden jump of post and engagement directed at a target. And it's because somebody who's an amplifier, someone who's highly networked, is causing that to happen. In the opposite case, direct swarming, this will happen regardless. So somebody who's, I think in my theory, someone who's a public personality, a public figure, he or she will face constant harassment regardless. I will show this by 2 case studies. Next slide. So these are the 2 case studies. On the left-hand side, my example of the Twitter Council, our resignation, and the control case is the BBC journalist, Laura Kunzberg. Next slide. In our case, what I was trying to do with my research was to look at what happened when we resign. So professional women resigning from our jobs. On the left side, you see our resigning from the council because of the reasons I mentioned before. And Collier, my colleague, posted and tagged me, Eliani, and my colleague, Leslie Podesta. On the right-hand side, you see the BBC journalist, her resignation tweet. Next slide. And so the work is novel because when I was looking at the concept of indirect swarming, it's the first time it's been quantified. Up to now, it's been many qualitative work, anecdotes, stories. And so there's now a way to actually quantify this method and help prevent it in real time. Next slide. So methods, and I come to my favorite slide. Next slide. So imagine that you are an alien and you just flew in from planet Venus and you are tasked to help humanity with this problem of harassment. Does it matter that I don't speak Ukrainian or Russian or any other language on this planet? I'm going to argue that you don't need to. Next slide. So I'm an economist. When this case happened, I was thinking more like a timeline. So on the x-axis on the bottom is a timeline of what happened after we resigned. This is a Twitter council when we resigned. December 8th, you will see on the bottom our resignation, and nothing happened. The left on the y-axis, you see the volume of tweets and engagement activities. Tweets, retweets, quote tweets. So when after Elon Musk posted, you will see the green arrow. You see the sudden jump in the volume of tweets and engagement. Next slide. So as an alien, you don't need to know what's being said in Ukrainian or Russian in this, what I call the swarm, the volume of tweets. All you need to know is to look at the signals, the behavior. If you have someone like Musk or Donald Trump post something, someone who's highly networked, and you see the sudden jump, someone posts, sudden jump, that's all you need to look for, these signals. Next slide. What kind of volume are we talking about? 4,000 tweets every 20 minutes over a 24-hour period. So again, this is the first time it's ever been quantified in this way, and it shows how much volume there is and how effective, if affecting that could be for a target. Next slide. In the other case, the BBC journalist, I took her data from 1 month. So she has been harassed for years. So generally, you can see here, next slide. In her case, it's 1,000 to 1,500 tweets every hour, and it went on for 1 month. But in general, she has been known to be harassed for years because she is a public figure. So again, in my case, it was 4,000 tweets every 20 minutes over 24 hours, and compared with this, because I'm relatively unknown, and this is a very known personality. Next slide. So what does this mean? It's important because my colleagues before me, the speakers before me, have mentioned how difficult it is right now because we are under the jurisdiction of the US, so to say, under Section 230, because it's all about free speech and protecting that. The work that I'm doing still would not go against the First Amendment. You can actually help protect users even with the current Section 230. And right now we know, because since Elon Musk, he has made it okay now for people to reduce content moderation. 40,000 people have been laid off since Elon Musk, from Twitter, now known as X, from Meta, also from YouTube. And so content moderation is not the same as it was before. Next slide. You can cut to the next slide, please, Maria. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry, I'm just going to cut through all the slides. Next slide, yeah. Yeah, next slide. So what does this mean for us? Many of you here are parliamentarians from Ukraine. You're also policymakers. and my speakers before me have talked about how important it is to try and make change. So this is one way that platforms can do change themselves. So for example, as a user, we can ask platforms to have a concept, for example, a button to help prevent this. So let's say they have a button that's called 5 Friends, because before you run for an election, before you do an event that you think is going to garner you harassment, you appoint these 5 friends and tell, say, Meta, or I wouldn't say Twitter, but some other platform, this is who your 5 friends are. And so if you then face indirect swarming, your friends can intervene on your behalf. How does this work? So look at the diagram on the left side. You identify 5 friends who can intervene on your behalf in case you're receiving death threats or the kind of volume of harassment that I just showed you earlier. You posted, this swarming is happening. Your friend reports on your behalf. The platform then runs the ratios and numbers. I have developed this work, quantifiable methods. And if the threshold has been reached, when there's indirect swarming, the kind of volume that I showed you earlier, because you're relatively unknown, and then somebody like Musk or Donald Trump puts you into a new audience, you see the sudden jump. If this is actually happening, the platform can stop it in real time. So I'm actually talking to one big tech company and also to another smaller company that's outsourced in order to try and make this happen. They have to implement a button that says, I'm being mass harassed. And you press that button, they can help you in real time. Next slide. We have been talking a lot about AI and its implications on our work. So in this case, I've written a policy brief when I was a fellow at New America Foundation, a think tank here in DC. And the work is really, I was sent it to various committees in the House on the Hill in DC. But the work is really about, for example, what I call amplifiers, highly networked accounts. And this is, for example, pertaining to foreign actors, because the same concept applies. Someone who's highly networked could be a foreign actor, could vastly impact your democracy because of the harassment that they can do to various targets within your democracy, within Ukraine. And how do we prevent that? Because we can still look at signals, like I mentioned before, but look at these foreign actors and their behaviors. Next slide. These are my colleagues who have helped me with this work. Next slide. Thank you. And this is how you can reach me.
Thank you very much. Eliani, can I share your presentation with the participants?
Yes, of course.
Mhm.
I'll send you a PDF.
Дуже дякую, Еліані. Дуже цікаві речі, особливо актуальні зараз для нас. Я б хотіла зараз надати слово пані Ширан Меламдовський-Сомех, експертки з впливу штучного інтелекту з Ізраїля. Пані Ширан, чи ви ще з нами?
I'm here.
Yes.
Hi, Maria. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here today. Tatiana, Elirani, York, my colleagues. This time I want to share with you a new angle, how we can leverage the power of the Gen AI to address severe social issues like human trafficking or violence against women and more. So I'm the founder of Generative AI for Good. And I'm going to share with you a bit of my journey and the project that I led and the impact that achieved. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Just want to make sure that I can share the presentation. Maria, can you give me access?
That may be problematic. I will try, but I can't promise it.
Okay, if not, I will share here my link to the website.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you can share it.
Okay. Okay.
And I will guide you where are the projects that I can, that I want to share with the group here.
Mm-hmm.
So I send in the chat the link to the website.
I don't see it yet.
In the chat.
No, I don't see it.
Wait. Here.
Okay. Yes.
And just also make sure that there is a sound, because the sound also is very important.
No. Stop. Okay. You can start speaking. I will switch it on
Yes.
with the sound.
Okay. So I'm actually coming from the tech industry. I used to work with startups, tech companies, also multinationals, and create a commercial relationship between both sides. Until 3.5 years ago already, I met a domestic violence survivor that shared her story with the whole country. And by doing so, I thought to dramatically increase awareness to domestic violence. And it's got me thinking about all the women that are not with us anymore. And I thought, what if we can hear their voices as well, the voices of the victims? And I thought, I'm familiar with an amazing AI technology, and think about it, 3.5 years ago, it was before the hype of the ChatGPT and the generative AI. But also then I saw the potential of this powerful technology. And Maria, if you can scroll down, I will show you where is the first project. A bit more here. So you see, listen to my voice, the pink one on the left. So just double click on him. Yeah. So after I got the family's consent and also recruited the relevant partners, and after 9 months of very hard work, I came with a Listen to My Voice project. And here we brought back to life virtually, just stay on the first video. Stay on the first video, this one, yes, but wait just a second before play it. And we virtually brought back to life 5 diverse women. Each of them has been murdered by their partner. And now I want to introduce you to Michal Sela. Her case is one of the most famous and also infamous cases in Israel. Michal was 32 years old. Just a second. I want to tell you a bit about her before we can share it. She was 32 years old. She came from a loving family. She was beloved. She has many friends. She was also qualified social worker. However, 5 years ago, her husband stabbed her to death. And for a family and close friend, this murder was a completely shock. And now I want you all hear what Michal has to say. And there is a volume. We just need the sound. Maria, we cannot hear.
I cannot switch it on right now. I shared the link to the video.
Okay, to the website. So here you can see Michal, that unfortunately is not with us anymore, share her story from her own mouth. And we built those scripts together with her family, with the domestic violence experts, and also with the law firm to be accurate as much as possible. So this project was, if you can scroll down also, so we can see the impact, it was a tremendous success. It went very, very viral in the social media. We've been in the national news, TV channels all across, both internal and international as well. We won international awards. We consider to have 10 million views just in 3 days. And the engagement rate was also very high. And this is one of our many achievements here, because we saw that almost half of the viewers were men. And usually those kind of content of violence against women, the audience unfortunately are women. And if you want to create a real change, we also need to engage men. And in this project, we succeeded. If you can scroll down. So we have 5 women, a very diverse background from the Arab community, Ethiopian community, different ages, so on. Also scroll down. We present it in international stages like in the UN, NATO, parliaments around the world. won international awards. As you can see here, we had 28 partners, including Meta. And above all, we, of course, increase awareness about violence against women and domestic violence. Okay, now, Maria, if you can go back. Here you see you see a tab named Project. Yeah, the first one. And you can go now to In My Voice. So here it's a project against human trafficking, focusing on the US. And we launched it last July, in the International Day. And here we did exactly the opposite. First of all, we worked with a local organization in the US, and they connect us to survivors. And those survivors share their stories in the real voice, very authentic testimony, but this time from an avatar. And in that way, we can make sure to keep the privacy of those victims, of those survivors, actually. You can play the video. You're probably not going to hear again, but see how authentic it looks like. This is the story of Courtney. And then we have a few testimonies of the survivors, like they are still alive and were very brave to share their testimony, but also for them it was very important to stay anonymous and keep their privacy. And this is the first testimony. But you cannot hear the testimony. So we can keep the authentic testimony with the real tone, with the emotion and all of this, and also give her like a face instead of share a story behind, like a gray screen or a blurb screen. And also we include men in this project that survived or suffer sexual abuse when he was a child. Okay, now you can scroll down. And then we got the response and the feedback from survivor, like globally. And their feedback was very important for us, of course, but also, and they shared that they were really impressed of this project, and it was very important for them because it's very difficult for them to share and speak up. And this platform, this opportunity allowed them to speak up and don't leave like nothing happened, and also keep their privacy and protect their families, like their children, their parents, and their relatives as well. Okay, now you can go back to the project. Here, animated Sophia chat. And this is another tool. It's animated chatbot that's supporting women suffering from abuse. We launched it like a year and a half ago. And here we collaborated with Microsoft that contributed the infrastructure for the chatbot, like the cloud services, the Azure and other AI services as well. We collaborate with the NGO named Spring Act. That this NGO developed the chatbot, developed Sophia Chat and all the relevant information. And we collaborate also with DAD, that we use their AI technology to animate Sophia and create more human-like experience, and also make it more accessible to people from different literacy levels. And we collaborate with the UN Women as well, that really support in this project and assist us to spread the word about it. And by the way, it's interesting. We launched it, we did it a year and a half ago, and back then it was very important for us to keep it the chatbot pre-scripted, like not LLM based, because the accuracy of the information can be a life-saving or exactly the opposite. And we really didn't want to take the risk. But now that technology and the AI become more advanced, now we're working on make this version like LLM based and have a more neutral conversation with a chatbot. And the immediate impact that we saw of this chatbot is an increase of 77% of using the chatbot. And we present it also in the UN and ITU event. And this project also get a lot of very positive coverage globally. But I think the strength of collaboration between the different sectors here is very, very powerful. And now I want to show you another project. If you can go up to the project tab here, go to the last one, the missing people. And this project we did in the UK. And here we reinvent the posters of the missing. You're probably familiar with the oldest one, the more familiar poster that existed for decades so far. And we had a clear, maybe you can scroll down so you can see the, not the video, we don't need the video. I think there is a GIF, so we can see in the GIF, scroll down. Here, no, up. I want you to see the posters here. So we had a clear call to action, help find, and a QR code to make the information more accessible. And of course, we animated the faces of those missing children. And then we posted on the billboards in prime locations in London. And so we want to increase awareness among the pedestrian, the public, the police. And that's what we did. And also the immediate impact that we saw is an increase of 170% in traffic to the website. And we are still working, like we have more projects in a different domain, but I think it was interesting and important for me to share with you what we can do in a very sensitive and creative way, and of course in an ethical way, to leverage this powerful technology and you know, to empower the survivor and increase awareness to those kind of pandemic and save lives. And also, if you can go to the main page, to the home page, yes, you can click here and scroll down. Also, if you can scroll down, you can see here the partners. If you go to the partners, the power of the collaboration. So we have the private sector, private companies like Microsoft, like Meta, like DAG, and many more that contributed the technology and their professional knowledge about the integration of this. The non-profit contribute their professional knowledge about the specific topic as human trafficking. And the governance that assists us to make those projects, you know, in the national and international level, and also sponsor those kind of projects as well. And this is it. Maria, I cannot hear you.
Дуже дякуємо, Ширан. Надзвичайно цікаві ідеї. Сподіваюся, ми зможемо поділитися ними з людьми, які працюють із генеративним штучним інтелектом в Україні. А зараз, з вашого дозволу, я хочу передати слово останнім за порядком, але не останнім за важливістю, людям, які працюють з цією темою конкретно в Україні. Це Анастасія Дякова, громадська організація Центр захищеності в інтернеті Stop Sexting, та її колега Ірина Пущук. Пущук, прошу, будь ласка, вмикайте мікрофон і прошу.
Вітаю, колеги. Ірина, попрошу включити презентацію. Дуже раді сьогодні бути тут з вами.
Марія, якщо ви можете дати нам, будь ласка, право поширити екран.
Якби я могла, я б з таким задоволенням це зробила, вірите?
Окей, а хто це може зробити технічно? Хто це може зробити?
Нема, наш технічний фахівець побіг на інший захід.
А як тоді нам виступати без презентації?
Якщо ви мені дасте посилання, що у вас є веб-сайт, я можу відкрити так, як зараз для Ширан робила.
Ми можемо спробувати.
Угу.
Ірина, ти можеш надіслати?
Чи презентацію, скиньте мені, я буду для вас її показувати.
Надіслала в чат.
Угу.
Тоді чекаємо презентацію, будемо дуже раді тоді почати.
Ви можете починати. Я зараз відкриваю її для всіх.
Я буду тоді українською для зберігання часу колег. Дуже рада всіх сьогодні вітати. Мене звати Діякова Анастасія. Я є засновницею провідної в Україні громадської організації щодо захисту дітей в інтернеті. Стоп-секстинг. Можна наступний слайд. 5 років до того я працювала в українському уряді, в Офісі президента відповідала за напрямок захисту дітей від насильства, і також була радницею віце-прем'єра Федорова, ініціювала і вела реформу захисту дітей в інтернеті. Також спільно з Волдісним ми створили подкаст «Хороших батьків не блокують», і нещодавно вийшла моя книга для батьків. Трошки більше, наступний слайд. Трошки більше про те, що відбувається в Україні за зачиненими дверями дитячої спальні. Один з випадків, який стався в Україні минулого року, поліція поймала киянина, якого звинуватили в скоєнні сексуальних злочинів проти дітей. З використанням інтернету постраждалими виявилося 200 дівчаток, віці від 10 до 17 років. Вони були і як з України, так і з інших міст по світу, але це одна людина, яка скоїла злочин проти 200 дітей. Скоєння такого злочину в форматі офлайн дуже важко уявити. Такі випадки бувають, але їх менше вони зустрічаються. Технології дозволяють скоювати величезну кількість злочинів. І разом із цим ми розуміємо, що з цих дітей тільки одна дитина повідомила в поліцію. Згідно наших досліджень, 70% дітей ніколи нікому не повідомляють з дорослих, що з ними стається в інтернеті. Можемо до наступного слайду, і разом із тим в цьому випадку багато дівчаток намагалися покінчити життя самогубством, бо завжди злочинець це вбудовує так, що винна постраждала особа і що їй ніхто не повірить. А що ми маємо тут? Разом із тим, що українські діти стають більш вразливими до скоєння проти них сексуальних злочинів, також ми маємо вербування українських дітей з боку російських військових до скоєння злочинів. Підпала автівок, надання геолокації, і такі злочини відбуваються по всій Україні, від Києва до Сум, Дніпра, Полтави і так далі. На жаль, дуже багато цього вербування відбувається через онлайн-ігри. Злочинці можуть використовувати і штучний інтелект, щоб розсилати велику кількість повідомлень. Можемо рушити далі. Як в цілому виглядає контекст українських дітей зараз і чому вони значно більш вразливі до скоєння проти них злочинів сексуального характеру? Наші діти, як і раніше, стають жертвами кіберсталкінгу, рабства, яке використовує інтернет, кібербулінгу, їх додають до небезпечних груп, в тому числі суїцидальних, в них викрадають в інтернеті гроші. Вони, на жаль, дуже рано в молодшій школі вперше бачать порнографічний контент, вони впливають блогери, вони дуже багато бачать насильницького контенту. Всі ті ризики, які були до повномасштабного вторгнення, вони залишаються, але разом із тим діти зараз більш уразливі, бо вони мають менше підтримки від дорослих, дорослі батьки дуже втомлені, вчителі шалено виснажені, тому в них менше сил проводити превентивну роботу, виявляти такі злочини і вчасно допомагати. Тому діти більш схильні до ризиків, які існували до того, але разом із цим Росія використовує дуже багато різних онлайн-інструментів, щоб поширювати пропаганду, дезінформацію серед наших дітей. На жаль, діти бачать багато насильницького контенту, зґвалтування, страта і дітей, і військовополонених. І також росіяни додають наших дітей в секретні чати, вербують їх для скоєння злочинів. Очевидно, що це все впливає на те, наскільки діти готові шукати підтримку і комунікацію в інтернеті, і вони більш схильні погодитися на небезпечні пропозиції, які пропонують їм підтримку, психоемоційну, більше уваги, подарунки і так далі. І ми бачимо згідно досліджень, що кожна четверта дитина в Україні стає жертвами сексуального насильства в інтернеті. Це ситуації, коли дітям надсилають оголені фото або відео без їх запиту, а також коли дітей змушують надсилати такі відео і фото, і дітей питають про інтимні частини тіла. Разом із тим, кожна шоста дитина в Україні готова погодитися на зустріч з людиною з онлайн-світу в офлайн-середовищі. І злочинці це використовують для зґвалтування наших дітей. Можемо рушити далі. Це з мого боку передостанній слайд, і буду передавати ще на декілька слайдів моїй колезі. Я говорила вчора з нашими колегами з кіберполіції. На сьогодні в Україні ми не маємо зафіксованих випадків скоєння ситуації сексуального насильства, злочинів сексуального насильства проти дітей з використанням штучного інтелекту. Але ми розуміємо, що в умовах воєнного стану дуже багато випадків ніколи не доходить до поліції. Бо постраждалі дуже часто вважають, що в поліції дуже багато інших задач, ніхто не буде займатися їх справами. Це абсолютно не так. Поліція максимально активно включена. Але ми з командою проводимо наразі дослідження, підсумки якого результати будемо мати на початку року. Будемо дуже раді з вами поділитися. Ви можете бачити тут питання, які стосуються саме штучного інтелекту, можете прочитати. В цілому це дослідження проводиться по всій Україні. Ми опитали 1800 дітей середньої і старшої школи, і дослідження стосуються саме онлайн-сексуального насильства над дітьми, в тому числі з використанням штучного інтелекту в умовах повномасштабного вторгнення. Тому це не тільки про штучний інтелект, але в тому числі використання штучного інтелекту як злочинцями, щоб використовувати і скоювати злочини проти дітей, але також використання цього інструменту самими дітьми, щоб шантажувати інших дітей. На цьому я хочу передати слово моїй колезі Ірині для ще детальної інформації щодо України.
Вітаю, колеги. Мене звати Ірина. Я операційна директорка громадської організації «Стоп та спеціаліст з прав людини і міжнародного розвитку з фокусом на онлайн-безпеку, в тому числі як дорослих, так і дітей. Можна наступний слайд? Ми сьогодні досить багато чули про міжнародну статистику і загалом про проблему, пов'язану з гендерно зумовленим насильством, з використанням технологій. Щодо українського контексту, він є особливим, тому що ці проблеми, вони ті, що існують у світі, вони існують і в Україні, але до цього всього додається також контекст війни, в якому ми живемо, і його використання як і внутрішньо всередині, як внутрішні проблеми, так само з використанням російських спецслужб, про те, як вони використовують в даному контексті. Важливо підкреслити, що в Україні це відносно нова тема і є недостатньо вивченою. Наразі немає цілісного дослідження, яке би довело масштаби цієї проблеми, але існує декілька фрагментів з різних джерел, в основному це від Фонду народу населення ООН, а так само ГО «Ластрада». Зокрема, під час ковіду було зафіксовано в рамках лінії Ластрада, що було збільшення кількості випадків звернень, пов'язаних з технологіями та гендерно зумовленим насильством, яке вчиняється за допомогою технологій. З початком повномасштабного вторгнення дані форми насильства набули нових форм. Одне із зовсім нещодавних досліджень, яке було проведено так само Фондом народного населення ООН, це є голоси з України, і попередні дані дослідження показали, що гендерно зумовлене насильство з використанням технологій є одне із ключових форм насильства над жінками в Україні. На додаток до інших, як і офлайн, так і онлайн форм насильства. Основний фокус тут іде, як вони відзначають, іде на кіберсталкінг, кібербулінг, особливої уваги та жертвами стають дівчатка підліткового віку, і окреме дослідження і вивчення теми в контексті війни так само проводило EU Disinformation Lab. Вони побачили, що російські джерела використовують гендерні дезінформаційні кампанії, щоб зобразити українських чоловіків як слабких, а українських жінок як сексуальних об'єктів, що відповідно підвищує ризики сексуального насильства, пов'язаного з з війною. Зокрема, в липні 2022 року Центр ситуації з дезінформації вивели платні оголошення на YouTube, де зображували українок в контексті того, як біженок за кордоном, які потребують захисту від чоловік з країн Західної Європи, рекламуючи чат-сервіси для того, щоб вони розважали українських дівчат. Наступний слайд, будь ласка. Попри те, що ці виклики існують і вони збільшуються з умовами війни, наша організація продовжує активну роботу для того, щоб захищати як дітей, так і дорослих, зокрема, особливо вразливу групу жінок від гендерно зумовленого насильства за допомогою технологій. Так, наприклад, через урядовий контакт-центр ми створили у 2019 році лінію щодо онлайн-ризиків, і за цей час ми вже надали понад 920 консультацій, допомагаючи як і дітям, і батькам справлятися з онлайн-ризиками. Наші інформаційні кампанії вже протягом минулого року охопили понад 411 мільйонів осіб, як і через метро, телебачення, радіо та соціальні мережі. Ми тісно співпрацюємо з індустрією та іншими організаціями. Зокрема, у минулому році спільно з Disney ми створили подкаст для батьків про онлайн-ризики, з якими можуть стикатися діти. Також ми створили перший у світі VR-квест на тему онлайн-сексуального насильства над дітьми. Ми також співпрацюємо дуже тісно з нашими міжнародними партнерами в різних організаціях, зокрема в Британії. Так, ми хостимо на нашому сайті портал Internet Watch Foundation, а також портал National Take It Down. Це є американський портал для видалення матеріалів сексуального насильства над дітьми. І в нас іде активна освітня кампанія, в рамках якої ми вже провчили майже 1 мільйон українців. Це і діти, і дорослі, і серед дорослих це як і батьки, так і спеціалісти, вчителі, соціальні працівники, психологи, працівники правоохоронних органів. Наступний слайд, будь ласка. Особливим елементом в рамках нашої роботи це є співпраця. Ми завжди наголошуємо на тому, що громадський сектор не може подолати всі проблеми самостійно, і якщо вони будуть працювати без допомоги як уряду, так і бізнесу над подоланням викликів. Тому ми об'єднуємо наші зусилля разом з державними інституціями, іншими громадськими організаціями, як національними, так і міжнародними, і бізнесом, щоб в Україні кожна дитина почувалася безпечно в онлайн-середовищі. І вважаємо, що це одна із основних елементів, так званий nexus, який допоможе в об'єднанні зусиль для того, щоб подолати можливі труднощі, які можуть виникати як в онлайн-світі, пов'язаним з гендерно зумовленим насильством. На завершення хочу сказати, що гендерно зумовлене насильство за допомогою технології – це зростаюча, але недостатньо досліджена криза в Україні, і вона потребує об'єднання зусиль та більшого фокусу, тому що, як показує також статистика з нашої психологічної лінії, яка була першочергово створена для підтримки дітей, які постраждали від онлайн-насильства. До нас з початком повномасштабного вторгнення почало звертатися все більше дорослих, в основному це жінки, з запитом про те, що вони стикаються з сексуальним насильством онлайн. Великий відсоток цих жінок знаходиться за кордоном, вони були змушені переміщені через початок повномасштабного вторгнення. На жаль, система в Україні поки що не працює настільки ефективно, щоб жінки могли звертатися в поліцію та отримувати необхідну допомогу, тому що як і на законодавчій системі, коли вони звертаються, поліція розводить руками і каже, що, на жаль, система не працює і закон вас не захищає. Так само, як і в контексті бізнесу, вони теж не до кінця усвідомлені про те, які наслідки це може мати на жінок. Але, як сьогодні вже згадувалося, вплив є досить довготривалим та негативним, зокрема і в стороні ментального здоров'я, а також і можливості розвиток жінок особливо, як і на професійній арені, так і в плані освіти. Дякую.
Дуже дякую, пані Анастасія, пані Ірино. Ми вже трішки перебрали час. Я б не хотіла вас затримувати. Давайте домовимося так. Ви всі маєте мій емейл, ви від мене отримували посилання на сьогоднішній захід. Якщо ви маєте будь-які питання до наших доповідаючих, будь ласка, надішліть їх мені, я перешлю, зберу всі відповіді і розішлю всім, хто брали сьогодні участь, щоб ви могли дізнатися, що вони відповіли. Я хочу подякувати нашому відданому перекладачеві, панові Дмитрові, який з нами сьогодні. Я хочу подякувати пані Ларисі, яка представляє громадську раду при парламентському міжфракційному об'єднанню рівні можливості. Я хочу подякувати пані Елі Ламах, очільниці організації Центру розвиток демократії. Я хочу подякувати нашим доповідачкам, пані Ціці, пані Шандрі, пані Менді, панові Йорку, пані Еліані, пані Ширан і пані Анастасії, пані Ірині. Я розумію, що це далеко не остання наша розмова на цю тему, але ми поклали їй початок. Я всім вам щиро дякую за те, що ви були сьогодні з нами, і я сподіваюся, ми зустрінемося на наших подальших заходах, як в рамках 16 днів проти насильства проти жінок, так і загалом на заходах і Центру розвиток демократії, і Громадської ради. На цьому я вам всім дякую і до наступних зустрічей.
Щиро дякуємо за цікаві доповіді, за таку зустріч. Дякуємо, до наступних зустрічей.
Дуже дякую, Марія і команда, за чудовий вебінар.